The Roman Empire didn't collapse because they ran out of gold. It collapsed because they ran out of trust in a piece of paper. That piece of paper was called a tabulae, a promissory note. And for nearly 5 centuries, it did something remarkable. It let merchants, soldiers, and emperors conduct business across thousands of miles without moving a single coin. Sound familiar? It should. The mechanics are almost identical to what you carry in your wallet today. Let's start in the 1st century BCE. Rome is expanding. Legions are marching into Gaul, Spain, Egypt. And suddenly, the military logistics problem becomes acute. How do you pay thousands of soldiers across an empire with physical currency when the supply lines stretch for weeks? The answer was already in use by merchants in Egypt and the Levant, the promissory note. A soldier stationed in Alexandria didn't need to carry gold to Antioch. Instead, he'd receive a written promise, a tabulae signed by an authorized banker or merchant. He'd present it to another banker in the next city, who'd verify the signature and exchange it for local currency. Trust in the signature replaced trust in the metal. Here's what those soldiers didn't know yet. They were part of an experiment in financial abstraction that would outlive the empire itself. The tabulae system required 3 things to work. First, a standardized signature or seal that couldn't be forged easily. Second, a network of bankers who trusted each other. And third, and this is crucial, a shared belief that the promise was good. By the 2nd century CE, the system had expanded dramatically. Wealthy Romans, merchants, landowners, senators would deposit money with a banker in Rome. That banker would issue them a tabulae. They'd travel to Syria, Britain, or North Africa, present the note, and withdraw funds. The banker's name on that paper was worth more than the parchment it was written on. And here's where it gets interesting. The tabulae could also be transferred. If a merchant in Alexandria owed a merchant in Carthage, the debtor could hand over his tabulae instead of moving gold. It became a medium of exchange. It became money, in all but name. The physical coin was almost secondary. This is where the credit card parallel becomes exact. A tabulae was a promise to pay backed by a reputation and a network. It allowed you to spend money you didn't physically possess, as long as the banker believed you'd repay. It created debt. It created interest. And it created a class of people, bankers and financiers, who profited from managing that debt. By the 3rd century CE, something darker was happening. Emperors began debasing the currency, mixing cheaper metals into the coin supply to stretch their budgets. The value of physical money plummeted. And suddenly, the tabulae, the promise, became more reliable than the metal itself. People hoarded the notes. They stopped trusting the coins. The irony is sharp. Rome created the tabulae system to supplement a shortage of gold. But eventually the system became necessary because the gold itself was worthless. Trust in the paper had replaced trust in the metal. And when that trust began to crack, when a banker defaulted, when a signature was forged, when the network fragmented, the entire economy shuddered. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the tabulae system was collapsing. The network of trusted bankers fragmented as the empire itself fractured. Local strongmen began issuing their own notes. Forgeries multiplied. And without a central authority to enforce the system, the entire apparatus of credit, the thing that had held the empire's commerce together, became unreliable. What's remarkable is that the Romans understood something we're still learning. Credit systems are social technologies. They're not backed by metal or government decree alone. They're backed by a collective agreement that a promise is worth something. The moment that agreement breaks, the system collapses, not gradually, but suddenly. And here's what we inherit from this. The credit card in your wallet works on exactly the same principle. Your bank issues a tabulae, a promise that your signature is good for a certain amount of credit. Merchants accept it because they trust the bank's reputation. The bank accepts it because they believe you'll repay. Remove that trust, and the system doesn't just falter, it evaporates. The Romans didn't have credit scores or regulatory agencies. They had reputation. A banker's name was his entire business model. One scandal, one default, one forgery, and he was finished. In a way, that was a more brutal system than ours. But it also meant that the incentives were crystal clear: maintain trust or lose everything. The tabulae system eventually disappeared, absorbed into medieval banking practices, and later into the banking houses of Renaissance Italy. But the principle never died. Medici bankers in Florence used letters of credit that were functionally identical to Roman promissory notes. And from there, the lineage is direct. To early American banks, to modern credit cards, to digital payment systems. We think of credit as a modern invention. It's not. What's modern is the scale, the automation, the opacity. A Roman soldier knew exactly who had promised to honor his tabulae. You probably don't know the names of the executives managing your credit line. The mechanism is the same. The accountability is radically different. What the Romans discovered, and what we keep rediscovering, is that credit systems are fragile. They work beautifully when trust is high and networks are stable, but they are vulnerable to the moment trust cracks. The 2008 financial crisis, in this light, looks less like an anomaly and more like what happens when a credit system loses confidence in itself. The tabulae didn't fail because the metal ran out. It failed because people stopped believing in the promise. So the next time you swipe a card, remember, you're using a technology that's nearly 2,000 years old. It's been refined, digitized, securitized. But the core logic is unchanged. You're presenting a promise. The merchant is accepting a promise. And the entire system depends on everyone believing that the promise will be kept. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. If you want to understand how credit systems shape empires and how they fail, subscribe for weekly explorations of the hidden mechanics behind the financial systems we depend on. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.